I got the invitation to speak in Orlando in October. I got this email that says, "You've been chosen." This is pretty exciting because in the prior January, I had been at this event and I threw my name in the hat with 400 other people. And then they had to weed through applications and decide. So I never thought about it again from January till October, when I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. Am I going to be able to do this? So how do you prepare for that? What do you do? Well, October, I had no time. November, I had no time. I began in December, and I had to submit slides for my presentation on December 31st, but I was going to give the presentation January 16th. So there's this joggle in timing. And so I guess I began by shilly-shallying a while to figure out, what do I say? What am I going to talk about? They did encourage us to talk about our business, and so I thought I would do that. I started developing some slides, and thank you to Craig and his Toastmaster group. I went to that one in December, and then I came here with my second draft for you guys, and it was kind of shredded the first time, shredded the second time. And then a week later, December 26th, Craig and Tim and a couple other people joined me in a quick Zoom call to shred it again. And then, and so this is a week before I submitted my slides. And then finally I did. I submitted my slides in time with 8 hours to spare. Then I decided I need to practice. How do I practice this? Well, I've been doing a fair amount of like meditation and visualizations and all of that. So I started imagining. Thank you. And I will say, part of my visualizations was you, Rick. It was Rick saying, talk louder. I truly want to say that because that is not natural for me, as Rick is helping me. Remember, I decided to like picture the room that I had been in the prior year. And there were lots of rows of chairs, and there truly was about 400 people the past year. So I imagined these rows of chairs, and I imagined the setting. And then I just imagined being comfortable and confident. I imagined everybody liking what I was saying. I imagined that my belly was not doing jumping jacks. I imagined myself dry. And then along the way, I heard the phrase, don't practice to get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. I thought, how many practices does that take? So I thought, 100. The speech was only a 5-minute speech, so you'd think it would be easy. You'd think you can do 100 practices, right? So I started doing the tallies along the way here, but I kept on slashing the speech and rewriting it. And so getting ready to speak to 400 people had a lot of changes and nuances, and it did get better and better. And by the time I delivered it, it was as good as I knew how to do. So I felt proud of it, and I did feel confident. Along the way too, I was doing this hypnotherapy meditation for confidence. So I'd fall asleep to Paul McKenna, if you know that hypnotherapist. I found him on Mind Valley. And he has this meditation that you just kind of listen to, and I would put it on at night as I'd fall asleep. So I think these things worked because when I went to the location, so I went to the location on the 15th, and I went into the room, and I looked at the room, and there was tables. So it was a different hotel, and it was a completely different setup than all the visualizations I'd done. This room had was 36 tables, and there were 10 chairs at each table. Thought, well, this is interesting. So I got myself up on the stage, and I imagined Rick sitting in the back, and I did the opening parts, and there was another couple of women that came in that were also speaking. So I got to meet Carly and Janet, and we ended up hanging out a fair amount during the event because they were just really fun people. Carly having pink hair and pink sequin pants. So very fun, very, very fun. And I went, there's an andum, a really significant andum. Anyway, so we jumped up on the stage and we practiced our opening line, and that felt like terrible. really sweaty, like, oh my gosh, and there's nobody in the room. So we kind of did it about 3 times, 4 times, and it's like, okay, we got this. Now I can visualize a different environment. The next morning I went there and there were 31 people that had 40 people of the 400 had received the invitation. 31 were there to give their speeches. And we were sitting around these tables waiting to begin. And then there were some tech snafus, and then the doors to the room were shut instead of wide open for people to come in. And we were wondering, well, when are they going to open the doors? Because the people that were in charge were at the doors and then they kept shutting them. And it had something to do with the tech problems. And then the person who was doing our videography did not show up. And so we're just kind of looking at each other like, what's going on here? I'm imagining this being something like last year, where there's quite a few people. And last year, there was a keynote that was in that room to tell people this is what's going on next. With that introduction, people were invited to stay. This time, there was no keynote. And there were other presentations in other rooms. And our doors were shut. When we actually got started, it was 8 minutes after the start time. And they opened the doors and the hallways were empty now instead of full. People had decided, and I learned this later because people actually came to me and said, I wanted to hear your speech, but I thought it was a closed event because the doors were shut. I didn't know what, and the style of speech was called Pecha Kucha. Some of you probably remember that. It's a 5-minute speech where you have slides clipping through every 15 seconds for 20 slides, 15 seconds, 5 minutes. So they didn't know what Pecha Kucha was, so therefore they left. We had 10 people in the hallway. They came in, and we had about 40 to 45 people there. The interesting thing about it is I had been doing all this visualization work because I was a little terrified. So for me, when I stood there, I looked out in the crowd and I could imagine happy, joyful people here with me. And I did not feel a sense of disappointment in those moments. And interestingly, I did not feel a sense of relief either. I was just there. So I think that visualization process was really powerful and really helpful. The thing I wish I had practiced was actually holding a mic. Whoops, I was going to pick it up. But anyway, they handed us a mic. Last year, there were lavaliers, so they put them on your clothes. So I had not practiced that, and my memory for my speech was tied up in some of my hand movements. And so then when I had a mic, I was like, hiccups a little bit, like pauses along the way so that I didn't do it as fluidly as I wish I had. But when I looked at the recording, it was fine. So for me, I think the experience of speaking to 400 people is really the merge of my imagination and the reality of the situation that I experienced, because it wasn't totally not that experience, because in my mind, it had part of it. So that's what it's like to speak to 400 people.